All right, let's dive right in. When you hear the word Epicurean, what really comes to mind? For most of us, it's luxury, fine dining, maybe a little bit of over-the-top indulgence. Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack how this 2,000-year-old philosophy got its modern meaning so wrong.
I mean, it's the fundamental question, right? It's what all of philosophy is trying to answer. And the Epicureans had this powerful and honestly pretty surprising answer. And spoiler alert, it has almost nothing to do with fancy dinners.
So, let's just get this straight, right from the get-go. On one side, you have the modern idea of an Epicurean, the foodie, the luxury seeker. But the ancient reality? It's a whole different ballgame. The goal wasn't some wild party. It was tranquility, a life free from pain, both in your body and, maybe more importantly, in your soul. That is a huge difference.
Okay, so to really get where Epicurus was coming from, you have to understand who he was arguing against, because you see, not all pleasure-seeking is created equal.
All right, so first up, meet the Cyrenics. Now, technically, they were a Socratic school, but they took Socrates' famous advice, know thyself, and they just ran with it in a totally different direction. For them, self-knowledge wasn't about virtue or morality. Nope, it was just a tool to figure out what gives you the most enjoyment, right here, right now.
And this was basically their life's motto. Talk about extreme, right? The Cyrenaics were not playing the long game. They were all about immediate, intense, and mostly physical pleasure. Go for the biggest thrill you can find and do it now.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating and kind of dark. This whole philosophy, when you take it to its logical conclusion, well, it goes to a pretty grim place. There was this one Cyrenaic, a guy named Hegesias, and he basically argued, look, a life with a surplus of pleasure, that's impossible. So the best we can really hope for is just the absence of pain. And his solution for that? End it all. Seriously, he actually started counseling suicide. The story goes he got fired from his teaching job because he was, and I'm not making this up, losing students. You can see why.
And this is where Epicurus steps in. He looked at that Cyrenaic path and basically saw a dead end. He knew there had to be a better way, a more moderate, more sustainable, and honestly, a more refined approach to happiness.
Okay, this brings us to what is maybe the single most important word in all of Epicurean philosophy, ataraxia. This was the end game. This was the goal. It's not about ecstatic joy or crazy highs. It's about a deep, stable tranquility. Think of it as freedom from physical pain, for sure, but just as importantly, it's freedom from all that mental noise, the anxiety, the fear, the worry that keeps you up at night.
So, the big question is, how do you get to this state of ataraxia? Well, Epicurus said the highest quality pleasures, they aren't physical at all. He prized things like having good friends and deep conversations, the joy of learning and education, living in a society that's basically fair, and crucially, just having what you actually need without overindulging. It's about pleasures that bring a lasting calm to the soul, not just a fleeting buzz.
Okay, so that sounds like a great ethical goal, right? But you have to remember, for the ancient Greeks, a philosophy couldn't just be a self-help guide. It had to be a complete system. It needed to be grounded in a deep understanding of how the entire universe actually works.
And this is where things get really cool. The Epicureans didn't just pull their ethics out of thin air. They based it all on a radical theory of physics, which they actually inherited from an earlier thinker named Democritus.
Their starting point was a classic Greek idea. You can't get something from nothing. Out of nothing, nothing comes. And if that's true, it means the universe was never created, it's always been here. And what's it made of? Well, just two things. Tiny, indestructible particles called atoms, and the empty space, the void, that they move around in. Their model of the entire cosmos was surprisingly simple. I mean, really simple. Step 1. Just imagine all these atoms falling straight down through the void. Forever. Kind of boring, right? But then, step 2. For no particular reason, one single atom randomly swerves, just a little bit. And that tiny, unpredictable swerve is everything. It causes a collision, which leads to another and another. And that cosmic chain reaction is what forms everything we see. Stars, planets, you, me, all of it.
Now, this random swerve is so important. Think about it. In a purely mechanical universe where everything is just cause and effect, where's the room for free will? How can we make choices? Well, the swerve was their brilliant answer.
It introduced this tiny element of pure chance, of unpredictability into the system. It's a little gap in the chain of cause and effect, and that gap is where they believed human freedom lives.
They also made this really clever distinction that honestly still holds up pretty well today. They said atoms themselves only have what we'd call primary qualities, things like size, shape, and weight. These are objectively real. But all the other stuff we experience, secondary qualities like color, smell, taste, those aren't actually in the objects themselves. They're just subjective experiences created in our minds when those atoms hit our senses.
And this whole atom theory? It applied to everything. And I mean everything. Even the soul. For the Epicureans, your soul isn't some mystical ghost-in-the-machine kind of thing. Nope. It's a physical part of you, made of the absolute finest, smoothest, roundest atoms. And the implication of that is huge. When your body dies, those soul atoms just scatter. There is no afterlife.
Okay, so let's pause and think about this. If everything is just atoms, and your soul just disappears when you die, that has massive implications for how we ought to live our lives, right?
All right, let's take justice, for example. In a world with no gods and no divine law, where does morality come from? Well, for Epicurus, it's not some absolute cosmic thing. Justice is simply a practical agreement. It's a social contract. Basically, we all agree not to harm each other, not because it's wrong in some ultimate sense, but because it's useful. It leads to a more peaceful, tranquil life for everyone.
And this quote really drives the point home. It's a pretty radical thing to say. Injustice isn't evil in and of itself. The only thing that makes it bad is its consequence, that constant gnawing fear, the terror of getting caught. That anxiety is what destroys your inner peace, your ataraxia. That's the real reason to be a good person.
And this really brings us to the ultimate point of the entire system. The physics, the ethics, all of it. It was all designed for one very practical purpose: to free people from the two greatest sources of human anxiety. Number one, the fear of angry, vengeful gods, and number two, the terror of death and whatever might come after.
And this brings us to their most famous and maybe their most powerful conclusion. If the soul is just atoms that scatter when you die, then you just cease to exist. You're gone. You can't feel pain, you can't worry, you can't suffer, and if you can't experience it, then death is literally nothing to us. Why on earth would you fear something that you will never, ever experience?
And there you have it. That's the Epicurean path to a good life. Understand the world for what it is, just atoms and void. Get rid of your superstitious fears. Cherish your friends. Live simply and seek tranquility. But it does leave us with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? If justice is just a practical agreement, and the only reason to be good is to avoid the anxiety of getting caught, what really holds society together? Is that enough?